All right, I'm here with Karen Pincombe. Now, Karen's pretty special. I was there at your wedding all of those years ago. Karen, we've been friends for 3 decades. You're also on the board of the food bank, which is awesome. You've been so tremendous for us. But I wonder if you can just, before we get into talking about Arts for All Kids, which is a very special program, I wonder if you could just give us a bit of your background.
I'm actually a professional musician. I'm a percussionist, and I've played with Orchestra London and various orchestras within southwestern Ontario, and I've done some solo work on the West Coast and here. I have a master's in percussion performance from U of T as well as my Bachelor of Education from Western. I taught for the Thames Valley Board for 29 years, teaching elementary kids music. And as you said, I've been on the board, and I can't even remember how long because I think I came on pretty close to the beginning. I wasn't there at the very, very beginning, but almost.
Mhm.
And I go to Wesleyan Auction United Church, and yes, we've been friends for so long. It's hard to you kind of blink and it's gone. And I still remember you standing up with Brian at our wedding, and it was a very special day. So.
Yeah, no, that was great. Um, but because of your music background, because of what you do, I know when the food bank first got going, we had a discussion, you and I did, and you really worried about the fact that kids from low income families weren't often able to afford music lessons or things like that. So you came up with this idea called Arts for All Kids. And I just wonder if you can just talk about those beginning days and just how you were feeling about it and why you wanted to do it. And then we can get in and start talking about the program itself.
Okay. I had always felt that arts lessons, whether it's music or anything else, were really important. My parents, I don't, as an adult now, I wonder what they sacrificed in order to ensure that 5 kids all had the opportunity to take piano lessons or pursue their passions. And then one summer, I had a summer job with Salvation Army, and
Mhm.
my job was to put on a musical with 100 socioeconomically disadvantaged kids in a week.
Wow.
And I wasn't the first one to do that, but during those 4 weeks and those 400 kids, it became so obvious that these kids had not necessarily ability, although they did. I saw all kinds of talent, but passion for this and joy. And I just went, this is a shame. I know they get stuff in school, but there's nothing like that extra outside
Yeah.
of school thing. It complements school, it does so much for their self esteem, but also just to give them a positive sense of self. And so when I came home from that job, I could not get rid of the image of these kids. And that's when our conversation happened. And it was actually you that said, just do something about this. And I didn't quite know how to approach it. So, with the blessing of the food bank board, we moved my grandmother's piano into the basement, and another friend and I just started piano lessons. And we didn't call it Arts for All Kids; we just called it the Piano Club Kids. And we had six, and I put 3 bums on a bench
Mhm.
in the basement and gave a lesson while my friend did some little music games in theory upstairs, and then they switched. And then Arts for All Kids has grown out of the idea that other people have passions. I'd seen that before, but I
Yeah.
got a call from a woman who said, I'm a poet. And she said, I heard about what you're doing. I have no idea how she heard about us because we were so small. And she said, I'd like to teach your kids poetry. So the first additional art was creative writing, and I wasn't sure it would happen. The kids loved her.
Mhm.
They did haiku on all kinds of things. And then someone else came forward and wanted to do visual art. And I just kept saying yes to these artistic friends of mine who just wanted to volunteer somewhere. And all of a sudden, I realized that artists don't have if they're a professional artist, there's not a whole lot of room for volunteering because they really have to go like mad just to make
Yeah.
a living, right? But they wanted a chance to give back a little bit. It's what I really admire and respect about the artistic community. They never fail to come through that way. And all of a sudden, we had 5 disciplines: dance, drama, creative writing, visual art, and music. We expanded from just having piano to a friend who worked in Orchestra London came and said, I want to do something with your organization. So he started the violin program. And then a number of years later, we had a volunteer, a young volunteer, who really only was with us for one session, so from September to December, and kept saying, if you ever want to start guitar, I'd love to do guitar. And unfortunately, at Christmas that year, he was in a very serious car accident, and he ended up passing away.
No.
It was devastating. Just this young soul, but he lived with his aunt and uncle, and his aunt called me and said, we want to direct the memorial donations to Arts for All Kids because he could not stop talking about the program.
Hmm.
So I said to her, then we will do what he wanted and we'll start a guitar program. So now we have piano, violin, and guitar. So it's just grown into something that I could never have imagined. And there's nothing like it. The kids themselves, to see the joy on their face, to see the parents feel so happy that they could actually give their kids this opportunity where they might want to, but there's just not the financial resource. And then to watch the kids grow and develop. We're now at the point where we've had whole families of kids come through the program, and a lot of those kids come back to volunteer.
Yeah.
So,
I think for us as a food bank, Karen, I mean, that was 3 decades ago. Or how many years about that,
I
right?
think we're in our 33rd year. It was
Right.
1988 that we
Yeah.
started.
And the food bank started 35 years ago. So it was right there near the beginning. But I
Yeah.
think for us as a board and for Jane and myself, I think we realized this is a value added thing that we could give to the community, right? That like these are professional musicians like yourself and others. And and we knew from interviewing families that they really wanted their kids to get these kind of lessons and they just couldn't afford it. So I think it's important to say from the outside, we don't see this as kind of a peripheral thing that the food bank does. We do a number of things like that. But this one is key to us, not just because it's you and because you've been with us for so long, but we are understanding that it's a really hard situation for people in low income to even be able to afford piano lessons. How do they practice at home? All of those kind of things. But I know you're teaching dance and there's poetry and all those things. Like I think we really feel as a food bank, this is one of our great things that we do. And that's why although it's kind of under the food bank in that sense, because we wanted to give you a home, we really have nothing to do with it. It's you guys that run it, and it's so great. And we really appreciate it. And I will say it is kind of funny. Like I was to the food bank the other day, and I went into the kitchen where our staff would normally be sitting and having lunch and stuff. And there are the ballet bars or the dance bars up against the wall with the mirrors. There's one wall that's all mirrors,
Yeah.
right? And I turned around and looked at myself and was shocked by what I saw. But anyway, I just realized you've had to kind of fit within all the movement of the food bank over the years.
Yeah.
Right? It's not easy. There's this coming and going all the time. And then we moved buildings a number of years ago and came into this one. But somehow you've been able to make it work, right? Has that part been hard, the adjusting to all the food bank operations going on in the building?
It's challenging. I don't mind the challenge, to be honest, because I love the uniqueness of the partnership of Arts for All Kids and the food bank. It's you just don't hear that. I know that you talk to people who go, "You have an arts program in your building."
Mhm, mhm.
So sometimes it is challenging, only because I'm very aware that we're only there for a very specific time period, and I know it's not when the food bank is open, but we don't want to interfere with what's happening there as well. So it's just a matter of talking it through with people and saying, well, would this work and would this
Yeah.
work? And my teaching experience, I discovered that one of the things I'm actually really good at fitting in, because in schools you are constantly, and as an arts teacher in a school, it's kind of something always comes up and
Yeah.
you have to make it on the spot, make an adjustment. So it is something that I feel like I was trained for in
Yeah.
some ways, and also because of the school experience, understanding how to work with everybody, how to fit in, how not to interfere too much, but also being able to say, but I do need this. It's actually a challenge that I don't mind. It's kind of like a puzzle, and I like puzzles. So I've just really appreciated that the food bank has never ever said, well, time's up, you have to go. I love our association. So the challenge is a good one. So I won't say that it's always easy, but it's one, it always seems to sort itself out.
Yeah, I think we as a food bank, we've sectored that whole section of the food bank off, the different rooms and the other things, and I think that's a sign too of our commitment to you and Brian, your husband, and the others that are volunteering and helping, because I think that's got nothing to do really with giving out food to people or food security or whatever it is. It's about poverty, right? And the lack of choices that people in poverty have. And I think we very much understand that you're giving people those choices. Now, I think I heard from somebody that I know during the pandemic it's been hard, so maybe you can talk about that for a bit. But I did hear, was it last week or the week before, you had 40 kids? You have that
Yeah,
right?
we're back up to, well, that's not our highest number before, but yeah, we're back up to 40. I think it's 45 kids.
But this is
And
the pandemic, so how do you manage that?
Well, when the pandemic hit, I kind of took my cue from the schools. I kind
Yeah,
of watched how they approached, and of course, they took all their classes online, which was huge learning curve for all the teachers in
right.
the school. By that point, I'm retired, so I was never exactly the tech guru. So in the first summer of the pandemic, I called all of our existing families and said, "Would you like to keep your lessons going in the fall? We'll put it online."
Mm,
And I didn't open it up to new students at that point because I didn't know what I was doing.
yeah,
So I knew that these families understood how the program worked and it would make it just that little bit easier. So it did mean our numbers dropped, but we use Google Classroom
yeah,
and the kids know how to use it. They use it in school, so they use that. The volunteers, if they didn't know how, we took them through some tutorial. Evelyn Graham, who does our webpage and our social media, she was very helpful because she's very good at tech. So all the classes now run online. Music is challenging because all of them are challenging. You'd rather be in person with the kids, to be perfectly honest. But to teach piano and violin and guitar online is a
yeah,
challenge. But all the kids in the families want is that sense of normalcy.
yeah.
And then this year, we decided we would open it up again. Um, and the issue was we traditionally put flyers through schools in the Thames Valley Board. The Thames Valley always gives us permission to do that,
Mhm.
but they're not taking paper
Yeah.
and because of the pandemic. So we did some electronic flyers, and then I contacted a number of schools and asked if they would put it in. And in the fall, because they were just coming back in person, a lot of it got lost.
Mm,
So we got some kids, and I wasn't sure if, it's one of those moments where you kind of think, is the idea over? Right. So, but at Christmas, I thought, no, I'm going to put the flyers out again and see what happens. So we did it at Christmas, and we went from like 20 kids to 45 kids
amazing. Mhm,
within 2 weeks.
mhm,
And a lot of them are, which I'm very happy to see. We have a lot of new immigrant families
mhm.
who are looking for something for their kids, and and I had to get more piano teachers, and our visual art class exploded. so we're trying to work through all of that, but it shows. I just went, okay, so it's not an idea that's run its course. It's
Yeah.
something that is really really needed in the community. So
I think it's fantastic that you've done that, because these are voluntary things. It's not a school that a kid has to go to. This is something that they want, so they sign up. So
yep.
that shows a real interest there. Also, I know that over the years, Karen, you sometimes had the kids give performances or be part of performances. Can you just talk about that a bit?
As far as being part of performances, the kids have performed. Some of the kids have performed with Orchestra London in a children's concert. They have gone to things like the Arts Project downtown
Mhm.
and done some performances there. When we had people who were doing a show and wanted to highlight the kids, so we brought different kids down every evening. They were the pre-show. But also when we hit landmarks, so like the 25th anniversary and the 30th anniversary, we took them to Wolf Hall.
Mhm.
And for a lot of these kids, they had never seen a professional stage. The kids who played piano had never ever touched a grand piano, and they got to play on a grand piano. And we highlighted everything. All the classes took part, all the violins, all of the drama, even the creative writing. They got up and read their stories, and I discovered that that's a really we want to keep that a special thing. But two little guys that came in and just for we just affectionately call them frickin' frack because they were like little tornadoes,
Mhm.
and they're twins. And one of them came into the top door of Wolf Hall, and he yelled for his brother, and I can't remember their names, but he goes, "Joe, come here, come in, it's huge." And they said, "Oh, we didn't even know this was here."
Yeah.
So but we also provide them usually, we haven't done this, has been harder online, but we usually have an open house at the end of each session, and the parents are allowed to come in. They attend their We shorten the classes, and they attend the classes with the kids and see what they're doing in class. And then we get them all together in the front area of the food bank, and the dancers dance and the violins play, and we do a few little things like that, and then they register for the next session. It's like a big party, and it's the only time we ask the parents for something. We had traditionally we ask them to bring food
Yeah.
so that the kids can have a little snack, and everybody loves it. And sometimes some guests come to see, parents of volunteers come and go, I had no idea they were doing this. And then the biggest one, that it's becoming the biggest one, is we do have an annual fundraising concert called Broadway with a Twist.
It's a great show. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great show, and my husband does all. He puts the show together. It really, we
Mhm.
couldn't do it without him. He does all of the arrangements, but always at some point in the show, we bring some of the kids in. So I know we've had them dance. We had some dancers, and then the last time we were able to do the show, we had the kids from the new musical theater program sing, and it also gave them a chance to see that here are grown-ups doing what they're doing, but they're grown up. It's a lifelong thing that they can
Yeah.
pursue. It's a wonderful opportunity for them that way, and it makes them even more excited about what they're doing.
So with Broadway with a Twist, the last two of them that you've had, I've spoken at. These are at the Wolf Theater downtown, right?
Yeah.
And I've spoken at them and talk about how much this program means to the community. But it's hilarious because you can just tell the audience is waiting. Hurry up, Glenn! Hurry up, Glenn! We want to hear from the kids. Right? So
I
that,
don't think
that
that's true, but
it is. Can we talk for a second, just practically? So I'm a kid. I'm 12 years old or whatever it is, and I want to learn piano. I want to learn guitar, but I don't have one. So how do I practice? What do you do there? How do you solve that problem?
we provide the instruments.
Okay.
Now, pre-COVID, we didn't do that necessarily for the piano students.
Mm.
In the beginning, we had purchased some electronic lab, a secondary electronic lab, with the idea of putting those in kids' homes. But at that time, it didn't work.
Mhm.
Recently, we were the recipients of an incredible donation from Music Counts. We made an application, and so we purchased a new piano lab because we were using the same one that we've used all these years, and
Yeah.
it was starting to die.
Yeah.
So what we've done in COVID, group piano lessons in COVID are not possible. So actually, every kid who's playing piano now gets a private lesson online.
Huh.
And so that means that that's a whole different kettle of fish. So we took the old piano lab and some of the other electronic pianos we have, and we've placed them in the kids' homes so that they can practice, they can have their lesson. And we're finding at this point, I thought maybe that was the key, is the teacher zooming in every week to give them a lesson. They're taking much better care of the instruments. And they're actually doing, although it was a shock to their system to find out that we actually expected them to practice. The London Community Foundation has been phenomenal to us, and we've gotten grants from them. We got a grant from them for the piano lab, and we also got a grant from them to start the violins. And Music Counts also provided us with more violins so that every kid has their own instrument to practice at home. And the same with the guitars. I was actually surprised when we started it that it's pretty cost effective to do a guitar program.
Yeah.
Not as easy to find the teachers per se, but so the kids, they're all, we keep track of who has what instrument, etc. But the kids have the instrument in their hands, and every once in a while, somebody comes forward and they want to donate an instrument, and so we will kind of figure out which kids are really taking off. We want to make sure if someone's doing that, that we
Yeah.
place it in the hands of a child who's not going to let it sit and have dust in the corner.
Mm.
So we make sure that they have what they need. And right now with COVID, the same thing holds for even not instruments, for visual art. They all have their own bag of stuff
Yeah.
and creative writing, so that everybody has COVID free and their very own
Yeah.
package.
I remember a couple of years ago, the Grand Theater always does December for us as a food bank, as you know, have people volunteer, but they did a Christmas Carol for a couple of years. And of course, a lot of the story of A Christmas Carol is about poverty, like
Mhm.
Bob Cratchit and his family, and trying to make their way through the Victorian era, right? It was difficult, and I remember the cast at the Grand were really into it, and Jane and I talked to them once about it, and so we were they were curious about the food bank and how it worked, and they eventually came down and volunteered for a day, and they wore their outfits that they wore at Christmas Carol, which was great. But when they heard about Arts for All Kids, they were kind of shocked. They don't put that thing together. And then I think we did run into somebody that actually had been through your program, or at least, or had helped with it, or part of it. You would remember that more than I would. But they talked just about what chance would we have had? How could we have ever got to this level if we didn't have that when we were young?
Yeah.
And she was really powerful, right? And I think that's really true. By the time, kids who are in low income and can't do it, by the time they get to the point where they might be ready, they're already at something of a disadvantage from other kids who've been able to do
Yeah.
it. Uh,
Yeah.
that would be right, in your situation with the
Yeah.
kids.
And yeah, it's true. If a child is has we our kids are different. Like they're not, and I say that because a kid whose passion lies in an artistic vein is it's not that they're not interested in sports, but they are different that way.
Yeah,
And they, if they have even an inkling in their mind that they want to go in that direction with their life, whether it's teaching or
yeah,
just for themselves, like community theater people
yeah,
or playing community orchestra, um, there's very little hope of that happening. The schools do a fantastic job. We're very fortunate that Thames Valley is so supportive of the arts. They have been historically. But it's not enough. There's
yeah,
not enough time. And so when you get a kid who this is what they want to do, or they just need exposure, sometimes they just had no idea that they would love this.
yeah,
I really want to paint, right? So I think that's true.
yeah.
Uh,
I was going to say, Karen, that sorry if I interrupted you there, but when I think of the food bank, of course, it's been in my fiber for 35 years and in Jane's as well and in yours. But we've always looked at this as philosophically, wouldn't you say that, we look at the food bank and we know that the aspect of what we are doing is the food side of it.
mhm.
But now when I look at it as the food bank has moved along, we've got into urban agriculture to try to move that thing forward. Jane has helped with the Food Policy Council and helping with that. And, so there are these other things we do because our philosophy is that you've got to kind of surround poverty with these kind of supports that are really necessary. But we've arrived at that point because we've been able to do that over the years. But at the food bank, we started with this when it came to Arts for All Kids. And I think what you gave to the food bank at this time, I think, is soul. I mean, we're out there, we're helping, everybody's doing all they can. We've got 2,000 volunteers, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
All of these things are happening, but you and Brian and the volunteers, you gave it soul, right? You helped to say, look at, okay, kids are hungry. That's just a natural thing. But it's also natural that kids want to aspire and succeed. And it's also true that kids love music, right? And all different kinds of whatever it is, but you've given them that opportunity. I think what you've done for the food bank is that you've given us kind of a mirror in which we look at ourselves and we see, what, we're doing more because we can, because of Brian and Karen, and that's wonderful. But I hope you understand, Karen, that from our point of view, and I mean, you're there at the board meetings and we talk about Arts for All Kids, whatever you need, they're there, right? That's just the way that they're going to be. But it's because you've got to our soul as well. It's not just about the kids. I think you've helped us to understand poverty in more of a kaleidoscopic way, as opposed to a telescope where we're just focusing on one thing. That's what Arts for All Kids has done for the food bank. That's outside of all that you've done for the community and for over 3 decades. I think it's about soul. It's an amazing thing. I wanted to ask, is that how you feel? Or do you feel more just like as a teacher and you got an assignment and you're going to get going? How has it affected you?
I appreciate the compliment. I don't think I've ever thought of our place in the food bank as giving the food bank soul. I think that for me, I've thought that the food bank itself, and because of the philosophy that it runs under for all of the programs that's come and gone, et cetera, that the soul of it is just like we ran is, and I think I learned this from you guys, is Arts for All Kids has become what it is because I said yes.
Mhm.
I want to teach poetry. Yes. I want to teach art. Yes. And I think it's mutual that we look at what the food bank is doing and we've gained from that philosophy, and it's allowed Arts for All Kids to become something that no one could have imagined. Um, as far as our, I, I think I don't see Arts for All Kids as um, an assignment ever.
Mhm.
There have been times through the years where I've taught all day long, and now I'm going to go to Arts for All Kids, and I'm like, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But when I get there, I think the thing that I see every single time I come in, it is housed in the kids themselves. They're a microcosm of what the food bank does and what I believe the arts do within the community. When you watch the kids come in, and even if they've had a terrible day at school, and they come in and we might have to help them
Mhm.
settle a little bit, and then they get busy doing the thing that they love, and the joy and the excitement,
Yeah.
and to see that. And I tell people I do it for the smiles. Had a little guy last night have his first piano lesson, and I had a young piano teacher, so I was in the lesson with them online, and he kept saying, "Can I show you? I know this, and I know this."
Mhm.
And she did a great job of pulling him back and saying, "Okay, let's do this now." But I just watched him. I laughed out loud several times. I had my mic off, so I didn't throw him off. I think that's what it is to see that happen within the kids. Um, and it is part of, as you said earlier about the food bank, it's part of my fiber now and my being. I can't imagine it not being there, and I can't imagine not being able to access that energy from them. And I think when I am down at the food bank itself, when it's not Arts for All Kids, you see that in the volunteers. They might not fully understand it, but they get something from what they're doing and the
Yeah.
camaraderie and the way that the food bank runs. So I really admire and respect that, and hope that we have been able to produce that within Arts for All Kids itself. So
Yeah.
the fact that you would say we're the soul of the food bank is an extreme compliment, and we just see it. I just see it as I love doing this, and this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. We don't see it as a program. We see it as a soulish exercise, right? That the food bank is only housing. It's you that's doing all the work. But I do think it's quite something to meet with the person at the Grand who had come up through the program, was able to finally reach that level. That's a wonderful thing. And people always look at that as a
Yeah.
real accomplishment. But the real accomplishment is that kids are able to learn music and arts and other things, whether they go on with it or not. Like I think of my life as a young man or as a boy, music was a huge part of it, right? Even if I didn't follow that as I got older, it helps to make us who we are. And that's what you're doing. And I think that's the major accomplishment, is not that one of that group will suddenly end up at the Grand or something. It's the fact that all of them were able to get music training and the other things. I think it's a wonderful thing that you've done, Karen. And we
Thanks.
really appreciate it as a food bank. We do.
Uh, Thank you. And I agree with that. And even as a teacher, that was always my philosophy. It wasn't my job to turn my students into professional musicians. It was my job to use what I do to help them in their growing up experience.
Yeah.
And and it's the same with Arts for All Kids. There's I there's one story about a young man that came to us and wanted to play violin, and he loved it, and he's never going to play. He's very tight in his hands and stuff.
Mhm.
But it didn't matter that he wasn't necessarily progressing fast. The violin became vital to him, and I ran into one of his teachers, and sometimes he would have problems containing his emotions. And she said they discovered that if he was looked like he was on overload at school, they would say to him, "So how was your violin lesson this week?" And he would
Mhm.
calm right down.
Yeah.
It brought him right in, and I that is what we want for the kids. We want them to have it's a tool, it's an experience, and it also, for some of our kids, it might be the only time in their life that somebody said to them, "You're really good at that."
Yeah. That's right. And for me, I think I see poverty as a family story, not as a kid's story. I know we sectorize those kind of things at times, but really it must be hard. Like, as you know, we adopted 3 kids from Sudan, but let's say we couldn't afford to give them anything like that. I would feel somewhat constrained as a parent,
Yeah.
or that I was failing as a parent because because the circumstances beyond my control. I don't have the resources necessary to
Yeah.
get them these lessons. So I think this is a family issue of what you're doing at Arts for All Kids. I mean, those parents have to be delighted, that somebody has given their kids that opportunity. So I see that as a family issue, and I think you've approached it that way. It's a wonderful thing, Karen. Thanks so much for what you've done for the community. And it's not a niche thing that you're doing, right? You've been doing it for over 3 decades. It's an amazing thing. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And I do want to say our parents are awesome. They're totally awesome too.
Yeah,
So,
that's
but
nice.
again, we appreciate that the food bank embraced us, and we wouldn't have I wouldn't have Brian and I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the food bank doing that. So,
We're
um,
talking about you, not about the food bank. We appreciate so much what you've done. Thanks a
well,
lot.
I appreciate that too. But it's
All
been
right.
great. So.
Thanks, Karen.